All right, it's like 6:30 in the morning. We're hanging in the lift. So I'm gonna head down and put some bottom paint underneath the keel.
Is that the sling dropped on the mud. As the boat came back, the rudder touched the sling and pulled it back. In order to get the sling in the right spot, which is where he's got it, it's got to go well below, down, under the rudder,
Sure.
And
yeah,
up the skeg,
up in between,
and then it's got to be aft of the prop. So whenever you get lifted, you've got to go through and run your eye, and as soon as she comes up enough, you've got to make sure that the sling is not on anything
vulnerable.
wrong.
So the keel is going to be resting on blocks when we're on the hard for about a week. We happen to just be in the sling overnight, and so while we were in the sling, I wanted to take advantage of having access to the bottom of the keel and throw some bottom paint on. That way when we get put back in, I don't have to, we don't have to sit in the sling overnight and do this again. It'll already be done. In this particular lift well, the water level is about 6 feet and at low tide, and so when we were coming out, our keel was sitting in the mud. And so just needed to clean underneath so that there was no mud when I went to paint the bottom of the keel here.
It is always a challenge to keep barnacles and other sea life from growing below the waterline. Like an airplane needs to be aerodynamic, a bolt hole needs to be as slippery as possible so she can slide through the water efficiently. This is even more vital for sailing vessels as they depend on wind for their propulsion. The more bottom growth, the more drag, and the slower a sailing vessel will travel through the water. Boats have used a technique called careening to clean and service the bolt holes below the waterline. On wooden boats, this was required to do more regularly, as wood is particularly vulnerable to ship or teredo worms. Teredo worms are a mollusk that burrows into the wood of a ship's hull, and left unchecked, they could render the vessel unseaworthy. It is said that the British Navy lost more ships to shipworms than to enemies. To combat this, in 1758, the British Navy developed the technique of adding thin copper plates to the bottom of ships. Copper is a natural disinfectant and toxic to many ocean organisms, and proved very effective in discouraging bottom growth. That brings us to modern below waterline hole treatments. The three main tactics used today are applied via a liquid to the bottom of the boat's hull, below the waterline. The first is ablative paint. This type of paint is designed to wear off similarly to your skin. As it sloughs off, it takes any bottom growth with it, making it difficult for organisms to adhere to the hull. The second is an epoxy coating or other slippery coatings. The idea of these is that the surface of the hull is smooth and slippery, that organisms have a hard time attaching themselves to the surface. The third type uses a biocide, toxic to marine organisms. This compound is mixed into the paint and slowly releases over time, repelling the organisms. There are many different variations and combinations based on before-mentioned approaches, and many opinions on which is most effective.
So the stuff I'm using, marine anti-foul, so this is called soft bottom paint, and it's what's called an ablative, so it wears off, kind of like your skin, layered skin almost. So I got 2 coats on last night before, in between rain and before it got too dark, and then just got 1 more this morning. So I think we're good for the keel. craziness, we ended up losing a large portion of our footage while we were on the hard and painting the bottom and everything, but we were lucky enough to have enough footage that we were able to put this video together. So the rods, or the raids, however you want to say them, they let air in, but they're not supposed to let water in. So sometimes they do, especially if they're just old and haven't been serviced in a while. Okay. Well, this one did have them, so I don't know. Okay. So there we go. It's a cool little bronze piece. I'm gonna put it all back together so I don't lose any of these guys. Alright, so we have a fresh coat of bottom paint and we're going in the water. As soon as we are being lowered into the water, I run around here and check the newly installed Triducer as well as any other through holes to make sure we aren't going to have any leaking and everything is watertight. So I contort myself down underneath the sole. Here you can see our prop shaft, and then these are some retaining nuts that hold a plate on, and behind that plate is our packing gland, and the packing gland is what controls how much water is allowed to flow through the cutlass bearing and around the prop shaft. A good rule of thumb is when your prop shaft is not spinning, no water is dripping through, and when it is spinning, there's a slow drip that just drips down into your bilge.